About 2.5 years ago, I was approached by uh, a group of psychotherapists here in New York, locally, who were dealing with patients that were very treatment resistant to antidepressants and maybe suffering from more severe, depression, perhaps some addiction recovery, heartbreak, bad breakups, grief, and so on. And we were asked to help consult with certain clients, certain patients of these doctors, in the hope that we could help them with some access to good cannabinoids, next generation cannabinoids like CBNCPG that now can be cultivated within the cannabis plant, and mushrooms, medicinal and psychedelic mushrooms, to help with reducing anxiety, improving productivity, creativity. So that's just a brief background. The goal tonight is just to have a nice conversation, share with you some of our experiences with a growing community of clients. And I can start by saying that the first intention with microdosing, only one real basic intention, and that's the elevation of mood. What we have found in the last 3 years, if you can help the user just slightly elevate their mood, the consequence of that is the triggers that tend to escalate upset, resentment, anger, throw you off your day, very tempered, much easier to manage. Another consequence of microdosing, first stage, is you feel less like you need to fix other people's problems. Many of us, we find some joy when we fix other people's problems, but when you get to a certain stage of life and experience, very often we use fixing other people's problems, and from a perspective of the mushroom, is you're not giving yourself enough time and energy to build build your mood, generate more focus and clarity. Another outcome of microdosing first stage from the elevation of mood, okay, one is tempering the escalation of triggers, two, less trying to fix other people's problems, is procrastination. One of the first obstructions a lot of our clientele in our community experiences that they're really struggling with just procrastination, and they don't know why, but they put things off, many different reasons, and we all have so many reasons. And so the mushroom is very much focused for, very much to help focus on the root cause of the problem. Unlike alcohol or cannabis, smoking, marijuana and so on, the mushroom is very not addictive. And I'm talking about both medicinal mushrooms and psychedelic mushrooms, and can be used very effectively given 3 or 4 basic rules. One, you need to know your strain. Although the most prominent type of mushroom used for microdosing is psilocybin, many people don't realize that psilocybin has many strains, and different strains produce different effects. Different individuals with different type of makeup, chemistry, persona need different types of strains. The pairing of the strain of a becomes quite important, and will be more and more important as we have more research. The second rule, and so critical, is dosage. So the strain is very important. The dosage is very important. Many people that I come to meet, maybe they had a psychedelic experience or have used mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, or maybe psychedelic mushrooms back in school. They had a wonderful transformative experience, or they had a horrible, quite treacherous, quite traumatic experience. Most of the reasons is tied to dosage. They took too much, the setting wasn't right. So dosage is very important. Understanding strain, very, very important. Source is the third. Where is it coming from? How is it being ingested? What form of ingestion? What is the source? You know, we have many people, they'll come and say, oh, I microdose, and I will say, great, you know, what form of ingestion? Oh, I just eat it, you know. Oh, that's great. Well, where are you growing it? No. Where do you get your mushroom? And they'll say, oh, I have this beautiful Reiki teacher who I just adore, and I get it from her. I can really trust her. And no, where's she getting it from? Well, her boyfriend, he lives in Sedona, and I think he gets, you know, and so very quickly you find that not clear where the source is. In a recreational mindset, is fine, but if you want to move to the next level with microdosing, everything has to become more medicinal, more of a medicinal mindset. And when I first, and our team at the Alchemist Kitchen first became involved with cannabis and mushrooms, we learned very quickly that we had to really protect and serve the community of customers by really knowing source and really knowing how things are made to the best of our ability. There are always new things one can learn, but source, dosage, and then a type of strain, three very important pillars. Once those are clear, the next most important thing is intention. Setting intention is critical. So if the first intention is just, you know, one is feeling depressed or low mood, going through a time of life, for women, it could be very hormonal, um, um, irritability, emotional vulnerability during cycle, premenopausal, menopausal, all of those issues. Very often, microdosing can be very well paired to help balance the mood, mitigate the tendency to escalate upset that comes with hormonal health. For many, the trauma is very often gut health. There's a lot of serotonin in the gut. And by the way, the way that psilocybin works, and I'm not going to be too scientific this evening, is that when you ingest psilocybin, particularly, it converts into a chemical compound, psilocin, which stimulates and activates the cognitive neurotransmitters. And serotonin, dopamine, serotonin, these are two very important ingredients that get activated. These transmitters activate, which creates and influences mood. And there's quite a bit of serotonin relationship between the gut and the cognitive. So we've seen a lot of interesting revelations around gut, and gut usually leads to eating, you know, nutrition and what's being used in the body. So it's quite interesting. It's not always that you're microdosing simply to get happy. You know, you're microdosing to elevate your mood so that you feel better about coping and addressing perhaps some trauma. And we are extremely good at assisting and doing the coaching. And that is the space that we have chosen to try to focus upon. How can we coach? How do we assist people with education? How do we give people, our community, very good access properly to all types of plant medicines, from Kana, great South African root, very, very interesting, very mildly psychoactive, to kava, a root from the South Pacific. Very amazing to use it for conflict resolution. If you're in conflict, if you're in disagreement with a loved one, with a partner, with a business partner, using kava tincture for relaxing into a mood where you can explain yourself, discuss different positions. It's very common. So pairing different types of plants and different types of mushrooms with the intention is very, very vital and important to what we do. Since mushrooms are not, you don't have any risk really of addiction. You're not going to get dependent. Very often people will come, users will come and they're on an antidepressant. Let's say they're on an antidepressant and it's been helpful, but perhaps the side effects are no longer desired. So very often you can use mushroom microdosing in a very structured protocol, small doses every other day, 3 days on, 2 days off, different rhythms. And then you can slowly taper off an antidepressant. It is very dangerous for the most part to think you can just stop. We are not advocates of stopping something to start something else. We think they can coexist at the dose levels, and the mushroom will win out, and then you slowly taper off, and we've seen great results in people being able to mitigate, reduce alcohol consumption. We have a lot of clients, maybe they're smoking tremendous amount of marijuana. As we all know, the potency of THC has gotten very, very strong. Many of us who are at an age where we have children in their teens or maybe college age, we can see those who have been smoking a lot of cannabis and weed, they can get very passive because the strength, the potency is just become so high. So there is an interesting shift in how to shift a bit to using microdosing to reduce the dependency or the tendency to kind of take your stress relief in the form of a smoking marijuana or drinking a lot of alcohol. Not to say that most times it's a great it's a great thing when you wake up the next day after microdosing. You usually feel clear and clean. Another very good benefit, particularly in a world that we're living in today, is you do feel more empathetic. Although you're more self-centered, self-centered in the sense that the mushroom encourages you to really focus on yourself and put yourself first. You do start to feel a little more empathetic. You listen a little, you're a little more patient with the kids if you have young children, or you have older adults. Many of us we're caretakers of children, and we're still caretakers of our parents, and the parents are living longer, they have health issues, we care about them, we love them, and many of those older adults are beginning to be receptive and interested in microdosing as well, because older adults, irregardless of whether they're struggling with a health disease like a Parkinson's or a dementia, whatever their health issues are, they all have one universal thing that's pretty common, and that's a sense of isolation, a sense of not really being in it. And with microdosing, it's very lovely. You can really get very nice memory recall. I had a gentleman today, 85 years old, um, you know, retired for the last 10, 15 years, lost his wife of 40 years a couple of years ago. And his big struggle is, memory. And he has been microdosing, and he's had little insights, like he told me today that when he was 12 years old, his papa would take him fishing. And so all of a sudden he was looking out on the river and he had this kind of insight. And that is very much the consequence of the psilocybin starting to generate and activate the neurotransmitters. Over time, there is something that will be called neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. What is that? That's when you can actually start to replant and reset the cognitive circuitry. How might that affect one? Well, if one has been struggling, let's say they had a very serious childhood trauma. Mommy and daddy broke up, maybe somebody, maybe somebody there was a tragedy, a loss of life at a young age, and very often that trauma is carried, it's carried for quite a long time. And the neuroplasticity, what can happen is through microdosing, you can actually move a trauma where one felt very victimized to where one felt they were more a witness to a situation. They found themselves in a situation. And okay, if that trauma is happening to you when you're 8, 10, 12 years old, you're not going to be cognizant of that. But in recall, very, very interesting. A lot of work being done there. And I should point out that what's great right now is there's a lot more research. Many of you, I would assume, might be getting interested in microdosing, or maybe you're doing some microdosing. Any questions, please put them in the chat. We're happy to, we really would like to take question and answer. It helps us. But the thing is that the microdosing experience is happening because there's more media. Maybe you've read the book, the Michael Pollan book. Michael's been a great fan of the Alchemist Kitchen. We've been blessed with the Alchemist Kitchen to meet many of the leading people in the industry, Paul Stamets and the people at MAP. So we're very blessed to have very good connections with doctors, the medical professional field. All of that is our job, is to try and understand that. What are the trends? What's the research? What's happening with autistic children, treatment of use of psychedelics? What's happening with the psychedelic assisted therapy? So we really have to invest a lot of energy with our team to stay with what's happening and try to articulate that through our events, through our educational programming, and so forth. The one thing that we really too have learned is everyone is different. And so in taking on this kind of holding space for people who were quite sick mentally, diagnosed depression, bipolar, other issues, we learned that having one-on-one consultation was quite effective for 3 reasons. One, we're still living in an environment where, although there is a lot of progress in the decriminalization of psychedelics, it is still not regulated. It's not legal and it's not regulated. So one has to be very careful in communication, in how to connect, irrespective of the fact that we are so totally dedicated to health and healing. Our interest is the relationship we can have with people in our community. We have learned that the one-on-one really lets people establish a sense of connection. Most of the clientele that we deal with, they're very, very capable of making decisions if they have the facts and they feel safe and they feel informed. They can make good decisions. And so what we have found is consultation, coming to classes, small groups, integration, people who are microdosing coming together every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and just kind of talk about their experiences. We've really learned, but there's nothing that can replace that. That connectivity brings us back into a relationship with the community. And I think we all know, particularly if you're here in the busy, urban environment such as New York, we want very much to communicate that plant medicine is just an ally. It's a tool, and it should be a tool that moves us from a place of stagnation to a place of feeling more abundant, more love, more self-love, and more compassion, to move oneself forward. In the old days, expanding consciousness. Yeah, so let's expand consciousness. Today, it's really just improve the mood, think more optimistically, deal with trauma, try to release trauma from being contracted within oneself to being a bit liberated, a little bit released. And in cases where one needs professional help, assistance, be a good connector. One needs to speak to a therapist. How can they do that? How do you do that in an affordable way? Uh, People want to speak with a healer. People, maybe they want to go do a journey. Oh, it's so popular. Let's go do a journey. We'll go to Peru, go to Costa Rica. Let's have some ayahuasca experience. All of that is all great, but if it's not done in a context of intention towards personal growth and followed through with integration and connection with people, we don't need everyone. We just need enough of us that are practicing an ethos that includes good health, and it includes having a contemplative practice, and it includes getting good exercise and expressing oneself, finding voice. These are all really part of where the mushroom can be a good friend. And the mushroom is not something to be dependent on. It's an ethos. It's been around 400 million years. There's a great, so many ways to connect, both philosophically as well as emotionally, with uh, uh, plant medicine. Of course, embraces mushrooms, although mushrooms are not plants. And, and so that is really the first part of what I've wanted to express this evening. I want to take one question. Frank is asking, can you discuss how one finds reputable sources for these substances? Right. Well, this is also always a challenge. Most people most users or clients we come in touch with, of course, are being referred to us as a source. And so when we kind of survey where things are at right now, I think most people are getting first connected through an educational experience. But once they want to actually have access to the product, to the source, they're really pretty much they pretty much have to go on the internet and take a look around and try to have a phone call, and most, okay, the Canadian-based sites, they tend to be a bit more authentic. There's a little more authority because, first of all, the laws are much more relaxed than they are, even here. And I think that sourcing and getting trusted source is a challenge. Sometimes through doctors. I think the holistic practitioners, the chiropractors, the acupuncturists, the astrologers, they're usually connected to people who can provide access to a good source. And I think because of regulatory issues, and the fact that there's not many places that lead with education, it's usually still very transactional. I think it's a challenge, and I think that it takes talking to people, connecting, asking, and it is a challenge. But I, without recommending too many sources, other than, of course, we can try and provide more information on that in a consultation. Pretty much you have to go out on the internet, I think. Lisa's saying, I have a notable case of lazy eye, and I've noticed that when I microdose, the lazy eye goes away. Well, that is probably because of the activation of the neurotransmitters. I can't give you kind of a more technical interpretation of that, but the cognitive circuitry connected to the muscular control of the eye may be getting activated or stimulated in such a way that could be having that benefit. But that's I'm not a doctor, so I'm speculating on that. So Kai, what periods of time do you recommend microdosing? Right now, I'm on an every other day for about 6 weeks. Curious of benefits, risks. Could someone theoretically microdose for the rest of their life? So microdosing normally is done at three times of the day, a choice. Early morning, if one has coffee in the morning, better to have, or breakfast, sometimes mid-morning is a second very good time, 10:30, 11, you're already kind of on your day a little bit. You've kind of got some feet on the ground, or you're in your routine if you're, depending on your workflow, whether you're having to go to an office or not, but mid-morning. Early afternoons, very nice. Microdosing, technically, somewhere between 100 milligrams and 250 milligrams. In order to have a change of state, like high elevation would be about a gram. So microdosing 100 to 100, 250 grams. High elevation, about a gram and a half. Altered state, perhaps 2 grams to 3 grams. And then from there, it's just more, you go dissolution, moving to where people are not sure which reality they're in. And very often that's done with with more assistance, self-directed, you can go pretty far, but with assistance. But I think if you stay within microdosing, I think mid-morning, early afternoon, especially if your work, the purpose of microdosing is not to avoid the obligations of work. Work mode, so that's a big factor. Yeah, I think you have to enter into a relationship with the mushroom as a friend, and you don't expect to be, you can have a lifelong relationship with mushrooms, but you're not going to become dependent on them. And I think it's about how to use mushrooms to, first stage, as I said earlier, elevation of mood. Second stage is going deeper. So when we have people come to us, gee, Lou, I've been microdosing. It's just so good. My mood is better. I'm not overreacting to people. I feel less stressed. But I want something deeper. So we take that as a message of progress. Whereas most people, when they come, what's it going to do to me? I'm going to be too anxious. I don't know. And that's usually anxiety. So you have to get that under some control. But once people are under a little bit of control, they want to go deeper. And the reason they want to go deeper is because they're addressing that they have some trauma that they'd like to confront and let it go. And so that leads to the second stage, which is assisted. I'd like to go deeper. Deeper that's a sign of progress. We view that as success. How do you go deeper? You go deeper with assistance. That could be a sitter. We have a great network of sitters. see it could be a facilitator. A facilitator is someone who is more therapeutic. A sitter is just someone who's can be very trusted. They're very gracious. They could come to your house. They can make a nice tea and this kind of thing. Facilitator starts to be someone who has had therapeutic experience. Maybe they're nurses. There's a little community of nurses burnt out from COVID that have been studying assisted psychedelic therapy. Quite good, because who wouldn't like to have that type of caretaker? And then there are teachers. Teachers are, usually masters. They're traveling on a circuit. They come around and they host journeys and experiences, a whole variety of experiences, And the goal of having assisted therapy is really to just cleanse and move trauma out from being so contracted. Many of us, we go through heartbreak, we go through grief, we go through lots of different experiences, and it's not like we get a sabbatical very often to just focus on healing. We've got to get it into our daily wellness regimen. So the mushroom is there to be used as an ally. I think I said that earlier, as an ally to build a healthier life. Now, and also with mushrooms, you're gonna have a lot of fun. So if you're not struggling with low mood and life change, career change right now is quite important. People are earning their living. They're blessed. They feel good that they can, hopefully be a good provider for people that they love, partners. But their heart isn't in it, becoming more transactional. And what happens is when you are microdosing, you are getting more connected to your heart. And so consequently, it can have an impact on how you feel about your work. People that microdose, they're not very patient with hating their job. They're very, very impatient. The mushroom, there's a lot more encouragement of, okay, how can what shifts can I make emotionally, financially, of course, is always a big factor, but how can I make shifts so that I can get myself into a lifestyle that is going to be more consistent with what I'm expecting out of microdosing, which is personal growth, living better, So you don't necessarily microdose for the rest of your life. Microdosing does build some tolerance, taking breaks are very, very healthy. So, someone starts microdosing, maybe they do it for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, take a break. A break could be a couple of weeks. Maybe you're going off on a vacay, going to be in a beautiful setting. Anytime you're closer to nature, doing a psychedelic or a peyote, a San Pedro, very, very nice, because it helps you get more connected to earth itself, get out of your ego and mental state. And so I think that it becomes something that you can use as a tool. And of course, we're living in an environment now where we're really trying to take care of our kids and our parents and our friends and our sisters. So it is quite familial. I've noticed in the last year or so, very familial. So if we help someone have a good experience, then they want to introduce us to their uncle and their brother and their sister. And we're able, like the mycelium itself, of the connectivity that we have with family. When we can heal with family, we tend to get deeper. And most families that you go through periods where you can't talk to your sister and your mother and all kinds of stuff. And I think one of the things we're really noticing in the kind of world we're living in, where especially here in America, where most families have been quite separated physically. People go off to school, all the things, it's a big country, living in different parts of the country. It's very hard to get everybody together. And so I think we're seeing through the connectivity of growing and learning to grow together through the use of plant medicine could be remarkably helpful to easing family trauma and disagreements, yeah. I'd love some more questions. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, and then I think that we're what we're going to see happen over this next year or so, I think we're going to see a lot more assisted therapy options. I think we're going to see continued uh, uh, decriminalization and more improved regulation. I think we're going to see we're going to see a lot more progress in the use of medicinal mushrooms. Lion's mane for good mental focus. The reishi-based mushrooms for heart. The chaga, the cordyceps for basic bone health, good blood circulation, vitality, a whole new generation of plants, slightly psychoactive, completely legal for sexual and sensual enhancement. A lot of good stuff going on with plants, How specifically does microdosing process trauma? Yeah. So I think what starts to happen is if you're microdosing um, several days a week, and then doing slightly higher doses on days, maybe on the weekend, where you're not in a work mode, if that's your flow. What starts to happen is you get an insight to a trauma. I'll give you a perfect example. Client yesterday, she went to the park here in New York, in Washington Square Park. She saw a little girl, 6 years old, playing with a puppy. And, she was sitting down on the bench and she suddenly got very emotional, very teary-eyed. And it triggered a remembrance that when she was 7, 8 years old, her mommy and daddy brought her home a puppy. And it was a beautiful puppy. And she just, the first time that she felt this sense of love, for this puppy. And unfortunately, a month or two later, the puppy had an accident and died. And then the mommy and daddy went out and they got me a new puppy, but that puppy didn't look like the last puppy. It was a different puppy. And she was deeply traumatized emotionally. Like she couldn't understand why mommy and daddy were not more sensitive, and the articulation of the awareness developed through microdosing, you know. And suddenly you'll have an experience. You'll be driving, you'll be walking somewhere, be looking at something, and you'll have this kind of insight of something that just needed to be addressed just in that moment, with a child watching another kid playing and being in love with a puppy, So there are many examples, like I could give more, but I think it's about you get in this kind of ready position, because anyone that's using microdosing in plant medicine is already at least trying to use natural substances as a tool for personal growth. And so I think that you get you get these insights. People who have body image issues, weight issues, the mushroom is very, very helpful in generating awareness and an understanding to how to cope. Because if you're eating a lot of sugar, the mushroom's going to let you know. It's going to make you aware that, or you drink anything in excess, The mushroom has a way, psychedelic, the psilocybin has a way of generating an awareness that maybe I should temper off that. And it also, it's not as big of an intellectual struggle. You just don't feel like drinking the alcohol. You really just don't feel like drinking, smoking so much weed, or you feel like, oh, I could skip that Adderall this week, I could skip that antidepressant. As long as it's done with awareness, it's really quite amazing, in terms of, again, these are not clinical trials, but that's the evidence that we're seeing. Yeah. Yeah, in terms of, when you say it's important to know your sources, we recommend looking for, Kaya, I would just do the following. Wherever you may be sourcing, you should know the strain, and you kind of good to know where that strain was, right? So let's take a strain: Golden Teacher, Penis Envy, Taj Mahal, Enigma. There's all kinds of strains. The albinos. We use albinos in our products that we advocate. And if the seller knows the strain, knows the dose, knows the combination, knows what's its shelf life. I mean, people eat mushrooms. They don't know how long that stuff's been around because it's dried, right? So when it's dried, it can very easily camouflage how long. So just the questioning of how fresh is it? Something dried still means got to have some freshness. If it's been on the shelf too long, it loses a lot of its potency. Mushrooms deteriorate pretty quick in terms of their potency if they're not properly cared for. So this is something very, very important, and also other psychoactives like the MDAs or the mescaline, all different types of forms. So if you can come across and ask some intelligent questions, you'll find out pretty quick whether you're going to get either I don't know, or I'll check it out for you. And you can at least read another layer of levels of trust. I don't think that there's people out there too. It isn't epidemic types of things where they're lacing the stuff with all of like fentanyl. I don't think that you're getting that much of a drama, but still, if you go in New York City to the bodegas, you don't want to buy what they're selling because it is very likely to be tainted in some way, So yeah, that's the best I can say. And of course, you can always ask us. We can recommend sources. We've discussed microdosing with mushrooms. Are there other substances that are helpful? Yes. Well, I think that LSD, which of course I got a long history and reputation in America. I think there's a lot more work, research being done with LSD. Although LSD is a synthetic, it's very precise, it's very surgical, really good for creative obstruction, very good for block, very good for those like doing a lot of analytics, problem solving, cybersecurity, that kind of things, So that's good. I think that there's a lot of different, as I said earlier in the presentation, I think Kana is really something to take a look at. At the Alchemist Kitchen, we have very good lineup of Kana, usually in the form of capsules. Kava, most people know kava as a beverage. There are kava bars. There's a lot of good work being done in kava in a tincture form. You take it under the tongue. All the medicinal mushrooms, there's a lot of good work people do using, replacing coffee with mushroom alternatives is a good place, good place to start. Um, uh, and then, there's the herbal side of it, which is super important, really getting to know ashwagandha, the adaptogenic herbs that are really so valuable, Damiana for heart, so a really endless amount of things. You got to start with where your issues are. Is it stress? Is it sleep? A lot of good work being done on lucid dreaming, where instead of trying to force yourself to sleep, you kind of get into a little bit of a dream state. You kind of relax into a dream state. Imagine that, more focus on dreaming during that part of the day, more insight, and you tend to sleep better. You tend to get into your deep, you get enough sleep because you're kind of focusing on a dream state as opposed to, I gotta sleep. I fall asleep, I keep waking up, very, very, probably the most challenging health issue that we see is sleep. Obviously stress. Any special features of the albino strain? Well, I think the special features are that if you use the strain dried, you should put it in lemon juice or lemon tech, because what that does is, the psilocybin, it's made up of alkaloids, which are little compounds. And when you take it dried and you put it in lemon tech or lemon juice and you marinate it just a little bit, it opens all those alkaloids up. It kind of macerates, kind of distills it into where it can be more easily digested, much faster onset. And I could talk. I'm very experienced, so I can talk quite at length around the use of strains. But when one is asking about a strain, it's also moves back to ways in which to consume mushroom at the dried level, as opposed to in a form of a chocolate, or maybe in a gummy, or in a honey, where it's infused. So in form of ingestion is a really interesting. It's a little more involved, but I think when you put yourself in a position to begin microdosing, capsules are very reliable. They're usually very reliable. You'll know the dosage is usually what is said is the dosage. They're often taken once every 3 days. The onset is slower, much more sub-perceptual. Whereas a chocolate, you're eating the chocolate, and it gets into your saliva, it gets into your bloodstream faster, so onset is faster. Type of chocolate is important. Cacao is preferable, less sugar. It's also a little psychoactive itself versus some commercial chocolate. And so these are all, any of this information, if you would just take a few of the pointers learned tonight and convert it to whomever you may be talking to about acquiring it, or accessing it, you'll come across as, oh, wait a minute, this person knows more. Once you can establish a little bit more, because most people, they come in, they say, well, I don't know so much, I don't know what I did, I tried it, they're just nowhere. So I think if you just can move, just like any consumer, if you go to the grocery store, you go to the butcher, you go to the farmer's market, you learn how something is made. The same kind of thing with mushroom, both medicinal and psychedelic. Yeah, that's a really, really good, important things to keep in mind. And I do want to just point out, if there are any other questions, please, this is a moment to ask them. I do want to point out that there's quite a bit of conversation around ketamine and the use of ketamine. And I just want to point out that ketamine is being used mostly by assisted therapists and clinics because it's legal. It's really a placeholder because of the regulatory issues around psilocybin, and other psychoactives. It's kind of where where the clinics and they had to focus on something. They need to generate revenue for these clinics. But my experience has been that although it can be helpful, be aware it's expensive, meaning the value proposition and the return on investment is challenging. You can have a good experience, but then you have to have it again. And there is some challenges where you're not able to get into a continuous relationship to it without going to someone that's assisting, right? It's depending on its form of ingestion. So I just like people, there's quite a bit of evidence that there are users that are getting positive results. However, it's a tricky thing, and it's just good for people to ask a little more. What kind of integration, what kind of follow-ups are available? What will be the? It's fine to try it, but what are the longer term costs in order to have a sustained benefit? I like to point that out. Yeah, and we will be sending this recording out to everyone. So many people signed up. I know not everyone is always available to attend live. And I do want to continue to emphasize that if anyone, any attendee to our classes, you're totally entitled to sign up for a complimentary one-on-one consultation at no cost. It's part of what we're trying to do to hold good space and do honor the mushroom and give people the best access to information, education, and products, formulations that will be helpful to them. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much and have a beautiful evening.